Hello and welcome to Bible Study. This is the Bible study we're doing for St. Michael's and Faithful Savior Lutheran Churches. And we'll be gathering together this Sunday, and if you want to talk more about these things, you're welcome to bring them up. It will be on November 13th. Last week, when we were studying the Gospel of John, we heard Jesus raise this official son, and John said this was now the second sign, and he did this sort of inclusion, if you will, with the first sign and the second sign as bookends on either side of it. And we came to the conclusion that the people inside there who maybe most accurately interpreted the sign was that village of Samaritans, the villagers who listened to what Jesus said, including the Samaritan woman, and then believed what Jesus said. Those were the ones who were, even though they hadn't actually seen the signs, were the most accurately reading or interpreting the signs for themselves. Today we're going to get another sign of Jesus. He's going to heal a man who is lame. But when you see these miracles, you want to do three different things carefully as you read them, as you hear these signs in John. One of them is always to pay very close attention to what exactly it is that Jesus is doing, the way that he does it, and anything that's germane to that story. John rarely includes random details in here. But then you also want to pay attention to the reaction to the sign, particularly to maybe the Jewish authorities, as we're going to see here, maybe his disciples, maybe the crowd around him. But then the third element you always want to pay attention to as you're reading one of these signs in John is that quite often Jesus himself gives you an interpretation of the sign, or at least the interpretation of the meaning of what it is that he has just done. And he's going to do that for us as well. But in order to get to that, we've got to get through 30 verses or 29 verses of material today. So we're going to want to get started on this and see how far we can get on it. After this, there was a festival of the Jews, as John tells us. Which festival? He doesn't name it, but he puts it into the liturgical calendar of Israel. And it's on sacred time. Not on Roman time, not on your daily time, not on a work week schedule or anything like that. He puts it into this sacred time, a festival of the Jews, and Jesus was in Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, which is called in Hebrew Beth Zatha, or oftentimes better in English, Bethsaida. There is, in fact, a very large organization called the Bethesda Homes, which serve the needs of developmentally disabled people across the United States. That was started by a group of Lutherans. This story has inspired wonderful work in the realm of God's Christian people, helping those who cannot help themselves. This pool has 5 porticos, 5 porches built around it. And in these, many invalids lay, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. There was one man who had been laying there for 38 years. Now when Jesus saw him lying there and knew he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred. And while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take up your mat and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. A couple things to notice here. 3 really. The first one is just a little textual note. Verse 4, if you are reading in a modern Bible with me, you'll discover there's no verse 4. This is one of the few places in our text of the New Testament where we think that the text that most people read through the Middle Ages may have had an addition stuck in there. And it's verse 4 and a little bit else. You can usually find it in your footnotes down below. Our best and most ancient manuscripts don't include the bit about the angel stirring the water. Doesn't change the story. There was this pool, and apparently at some point the water would begin to be stirred, to bubble, to boil. What was that? An angel? God? The people of the time believed that the first person into the pool, or somebody early into the pool, could be healed. This man had lay beside this pool for 38 years, hoping to be one of those healed people, and had never made it. He said that there was nobody who could bring him to the water. There's no schedule when this thing gets stirred up. You just have to lie and wait. And he did. And every time, somebody who was a little less disabled than him would show up. I want you to notice this guy is faithful. He may be utterly incompetent, but he is trusting that I could get there, and if I get there, I could be healed. Jesus says to him, "Don't you want to be healed?" The man says, "Well, the process doesn't work for me. I can't get there. I'm disabled. My disability doesn't allow me to beat out the other people." And Jesus just looks at him and says, "Well, take up your mat and walk." Notice what Jesus, or how this story portrays what Jesus does. Normally it is the person in the pool, the person who encounters these bubbling waters, that is healed. The one who heals through the pool is standing right in front of the man who is lame and lying in the portico. It's the same healing. Jesus asks him, "Do you want to be healed?" The man misunderstands what he says, but he says, "Yes, but I just can't get there in time." And Jesus says, "Okay, be healed." Jesus just more or less goes around the process. He jumps over several steps. In much the same way that somebody today might say, "I would go to the doctor, I can't get there." And Jesus would heal them. He might normally heal people through the doctors and the hospitals, the nurses and medications that we normally associate with healing, but he also can simply skip all those steps and just do it right away. And that's what happened here. And the point is, it's the same healer, and it's the same healing. Now, we get to the reaction. That day was a Sabbath day. When you read John, you kind of get the impression Jesus didn't do a whole lot except on the Sabbath day. So the Jews said to the man who had been cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered them, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" And I want you to, again, now here's the other point you need to notice, is the authority of that. We got a hint of that Jesus is the one who is responsible for the pool's healing. But now, the man's response to the Pharisees that day is really focusing on, well, the guy who made me well, the man who healed me, on his authority, I picked up my mat and walked. They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up and walk'?" Now, the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had disappeared in the crowd that was there. He says, "I don't know. But he healed me. He made me well." Later, Jesus found him in the temple. And that's really important because, you see, as a lame man, he would not have ever been allowed into the temple. Only the physically whole were allowed to go to the temple. The people whose bodies were broken were considered sinful, unclean, They were not allowed in. They could beg outside the temple, but they couldn't go in. This is the first time this man has been allowed in the temple. Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you've been made well. Don't sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews, "It was that Jesus guy that healed me." Therefore the Jews started to persecute Jesus because he was doing such things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is still working, and I also am working." So now Jesus has just taken his miracle and ratcheted up the issue a little bit. Jesus isn't simply another miracle worker, as there were others of the time. He is doing the work of the Father, that the Father's work and his work are the same work. For this reason, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but he was also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God. It's Jesus' claim. And what the miracle is really showing is that Jesus has that divine authority to heal. We've already seen Jesus sort of claim divinity for himself in the turning of water into wine. And we have seen him chastise the royal official for not believing, needing a sign before he believed, and that was enough to get him to believe. But the issue was believing Jesus. Now we see a little shift in what John is telling us about Jesus, is that Jesus not only has divine authority, he has authority of the divine, of the Father. And now, as John has interpreted this for us, the claim that Jesus is making is not merely that he is using God's authority, but he is God's authority. He is God, making himself equal to the Father. Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, the Son of Man can do nothing on his own." And here's this third element you need to take. Jesus will now interpret how to read this sign for us. The Son can do nothing on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing, for whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. So now, everything that I'm doing is what I have received to do from the Father. The Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. So now, not only has God, it could be that God would have an emissary and show him a few things to do, and that one would go and do it. But now the claim that Jesus makes is, but it isn't just some things of God that I'm doing them all. He has shown me everything, and so I do everything. Indeed, he will show him greater works than these, so that you will be astonished. Indeed, just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whomever he wishes. That's a pretty bold claim. There were lots of miracle workers at the time who claimed to be able to make it rain, who claimed perhaps to be able to heal people. But death, that was a whopper. Dead is dead. The Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son. Now, the Son has every prerogative of the Father, so that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Anyone who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Very truly I tell you, anyone who hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life, and does not come under judgment, but is passed from death to life. Very truly I tell you, The hour is coming and is now here when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God. Not the Father, but the Son of God. And those who hear that voice will live. For just as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself. The point here is not that God is alive, but that God is life. Do you remember that story where Jesus touched the leper, and instead of Jesus catching leprosy, the leper was healed? That's kind of the same point. Jesus isn't somebody who has health. He is health. And so when he touches a sick person, the health that is Jesus goes out to the person. Jesus is making the same claim, just life itself. Not that he has life or that he is alive. He is life. And that means when he encounters the dead, when his voice speaks and the dead, it echoes off the dead, however long they've been dead, they live. We see this in the miracles that Jesus does. He regularly, it's like he never really sees people as dead, because in his presence, they're not. He is life. He has given him authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. Do not be astonished at this. Don't let this blow your mind, although it's plenty enough to blow your mind. For the hour is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and will come out, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. You see, that's all flowing out of that Jesus simply, almost casually, does what this man who's been sitting by the pool, following the rules for 38 years, trying to get to be the first person into that water. Jesus can just say, yeah, I can do that. Because that healing's my healing. I am health. And it's not just health that I am. That means I'm also life. When John says, believe in this Jesus, when he says, have faith in him, or as we've noted before, it really means to faith in him, to trust in him implicitly for everything. The claim that Jesus is making for his people today is that every problem, including death itself, finds its solution, the answer, in Jesus. Trust him. Let's talk more about this on Sunday. God bless you.